moment, that is really the most fatal thing that can happen in any necrotic wake. So we keep our fingers crossed that that won't appear here.
That's right, as you know, the forgiveness level of this dungeon is incredibly low. And honestly, I kind of like when I see some of these teams start grabbing the shield. It's like the least utilized of the weaponry. Not really a weapon, doesn't really deal any damage, but it gives a 50% damage reduction aura all around you. And I personally just love that because there's so many times where you're getting a pull setup and some DPS just randomly dies. Whether or not they actually have the weapon with them is one thing, but I can't tell you how many times melee just get like frontaled by some of the vanguards running all over the place, or by the cleaves or anything. And I just absolutely love to be able to have that layer of safety. So we'll see if we get any shield action here as Reload Esports and Team Stiefbruders are ready to go here in Necrotic Wake.
Yeah, this first pull here is one of the most pivotal ones in the dungeon. Ooh, and the Stiefbruders are running this Guardian Druid. I actually don't mind this pick for the Necrotic Wake with just how massive these first couple of pulls are. And Reload Esports immediately lobbing their Ashen Hollow, their Bloodlust, all of the cooldowns as Blightbone has been engaged. And Stiefbruders are taking a lot more of a conservative approach to their pack, where Reload Esports here making sure that they get Blightbone away from that Sanguine. And they're doing a great job of kiting those mobs. There are a couple of mobs that were bathing in Sanguine, but it shouldn't be too bad for them, as that Corpse Collector, or that Corpse Harvester, is the only real dangerous mob that is still stuck there. And Angler getting knocked up, and oh my goodness, this is going to be a full wipe for Reload Esports. Oh, this is so bad.
This is rough here for Reload Esports, right? So luckily they didn't commit a battle res, but unfortunate for the pull to go like that. They did end up getting 27% count, though, when all is said and done. So when you compare the spot that these two teams are at, they actually really didn't lose too much from that going wrong, because Stiefbruders are playing this so slowly and so conservatively. And I think that for Stiefbruders, that plan actually makes a lot of sense. When you watch the game yesterday, and when you do a couple of practice runs of these affixes, you realize just how volatile this dungeon is. So if you instead say, all right, look, we have a plan that is 0 deaths. It might be 25 minutes, but it is 0 deaths, and it's a consistent 25 minutes. So we will let the other team roll the dice on their pulls working. We will let the other team have the Sanguine difficult moments, right? And if that works out for them, then we're going to lose. Oh. But our strat is going to work, and I think that is what Stiefbruders are up to here. Whereas Reload Esports, you can see once again, we have Ankler going down here. So much pressure from all of these boss abilities. Ended up being a boss frontal, but this time they've activated their Goliath, their Kyrian Goliath, as they're wiping here. And this is tragic for Reload Esports. Yeah, they gotta run and go. They gotta get those orbs immediately. They're on the ground for like 15 or 20 seconds. They actually need to go and just run right on top of them. And you can see they've despawned. You can see Ankler trying to door onto them. So now they're going to be left without that very, very vital resource. And it looks like instead they're just going to fight this Corpse Harvester by themselves. Meanwhile, the Stiefbruders here, in a tortoise versus hare type situation, they are actually overtaking where Reload Esports are at. Reload Esports did this whole room in one pull, but they ended up wiping to it twice. And the Stiefbruders doing the whole room in 3 pulls, but 0 wipes, are actually getting the better of this. And not only are they getting the better of this, they have a minute's worth of death advantage as well in their favor now. So if they can hold on here and they can keep this play clean, and a little bit more goes wrong for Reload Esports, they really don't need to do anything more than just pull the dungeon safely and consistently. And you know what? Guardian Druid is such a great choice when that is your plan.
Dude, Reload Esports they're all so low. Having that Corpse Harvester alive while having to deal with the Incinerator Arcaleth kicks, this is really dangerous. Oh, Simkins dies, not having any of his cheats available. He does release fairly nearby, and now Incinerator Arcaleth is going to be going down for Reload Esports, and they have to engage Blightbone for the 3rd time this dungeon. Unfortunately, not having any of those Goliath orbs or any of their weapons really available to kill off Blightbone, while the Brooders, 30% enemy forces count, very similar to where Reload Esports are, but Blightbone has 10% HP as they are getting him increasingly lower.
Yeah, Reload Esports aren't out of this thing just yet. When you look at this, the Stiefbruders, they're going to have a much better boss 1 split. They are going to have that minute of death advantage. But if the game continues like this, with Team Stiefbruders pulling half as much at a time as Reload Esports, all it will take for Reload Esports to get back into this is to have no more mistakes like this, right? If they can keep all of those big pulls and actually execute them correctly the first time, that's a tall order in this dungeon with these affixes, as we've discussed. But they can certainly make this time back. As you can see, like Stiefbruders, one thing that we didn't really account for, Incinerator Arcalith is still alive for them, so they still need to kill that off. That is going to mean they're probably only going to have that minute of death advantage, plus I guess maybe 30% of Blightbone's health as their advantage right now.
Yeah, they do have that Flesh Crafter that's in that pack as well that does that Throw Cleaver. This is really good for live keys for Incinerator Arcalith, or Execution Baruth I think is also in this area, and just utilizing those that Flesh Crafter and that Throw Cleaver to be able to do damage to those tormented mobs. That is actually just a really good strategy for live keys. It is, of course, not very fast in terms of optimizing time for the Necrotic Wake, but like you said earlier, it's the tortoise and the hare situation where the Stiefbruders here, they're playing a lot more conservative of a route. They're still going very fast, for the record. They're still pulling this first area relatively quickly, and they're making their way into this second area, but it is very reminiscent of something that you would see a live key team doing in a 22 Necrotic Wake.
Yeah, exactly. This is like a live key strategy executed well and quickly, right? I mean, getting out of this first boss room with 34% count, sub 5 minutes, is a really fast time, right? That indicates, oh, hey, we're going to 2 or 3 chest this dungeon, right? That's great news on live. But of course, the MDI routes are sometimes able to make that happen 2 minutes faster. Just way more dangerously, especially with these affixes so dangerously.
And this is a very standard pull for the Stiefbruders here on this, where you have this Brittlebone Mage CC'd off to the side. They either shackled it or used a blind. I didn't see exactly what amount of CC they used. And now they're grabbing these Blight Bags in this Marauder pull. And for a lot of MDI teams, they would pull this all into Narzuda and be able to deal with it. It is sanguine, very dangerous, and the Stiefbruders do have their Goliath Orbs, so it would be something that is doable. However, they're playing a lot more conservative of a route, and they've been rewarded for it thus far. Reload Esports have now just recently downed Blightbone. They have a little bit more trash that they need to pick up in this area, but again, you noted this, 55 seconds of death differential is not a small feat. And now you do see Cap grabbing that Silence Orb. I suspect that they're going to skip Narzuda here. Just because of how much trash count they have. If they pulled it, it would be, it's fine if you pull it, but I think they just how much count.
This is another live.
This is the aggressive live pull. Yeah,
this is something you would do on a live key where you were trying to zoom, where you're going to pull these mobs back with a stealth tank into this, and then this is a great opportunity for that anima orb that Cap went to go and pick up earlier, and you can see it's just going to be chain silencing all of these casters, providing a huge amount of value. Now, unfortunately, we do have a mob dying early, and that's going to create sanguine puddles here, but the 2 Bone Marauders have been killed with their shields, but Narzuda has healed to full. Yeah, that is a tough chain of events there. They can prioritize damage into it a little bit here, but it is still going to last for a while. However, this pull worked out well for them. Again, they're collecting almost all the count they need. The operative number we're looking for is 68%. Once you have 68%, you are good to ascend to the Necropolis. Yeah, and so they only need to do one more pull, and they'll be there.
Yeah, and I think that I think that one of the things that Reload Esports takes a lot of. It felt like they were playing a very similar route to what we saw from Ambition last weekend, where a lot of their pulls were very similar to them. You're going to be seeing them pulling these what are these called? Marauders. They're going to pull the Marauders into this Necromancer here, and then they're going to use the Goliath Orbs to kill off that Skeletal Monstrosity. It is a very similar route to what we saw from Ambition. And like you said, this is where Reload Esports is going to be able to catch up. If they are able to get 20, maybe even potentially 30% of their count in one pull after this, that can absolutely catapult them to a place where they are able to overtake the Stiefbruders with their more safe strategy. Because the Stiefbruders here, they, like you said, they need to get to 68%. That's not just this Necromancer, by the way. They're going to need to do a pull after this Necromancer. They are going to have the Goliath Orbs for it, so it's not going to be too dangerous as a whole, but they are going to have to pull maybe some Marauders and some Bone Carvers. Is just really hard to tell. And look at this pull from Reload Esports. This is a very scary pull that they are pulling off. You do see that Ring of Frost coming out to try to group all of these mobs. They're getting kicks on these Sorcerers to make sure that this happens. They have to get the Marauders interrupted as well on their fear, and then nuke down that Bone Shield, all the while kiting out the Sanguine, making sure that no mobs heal. So now the Marauder Shield just has to get broken. And Reload Esports, this is how they are able to come back. The Skeletal Monstrosity, unfortunately, was not with the remainder of that trash because of where its patrol was. It wasn't really in a great spot to be able to pull it into that pack like we saw them do yesterday. But they're going to be electing to do it by itself, and they still have those Goliath Orbs for just a little bit longer.
Yeah, they are almost even on count here. They are nearly caught up on that metric. Of course, 55 seconds is a lot of death differential to overcome here. But if they can pull the Necropolis aggressively, maybe they can make it happen there. Or if they can find a way to do something more ambitious than what the Stiefbruders are up to with regards to the boss here. The Stiefbruders are actually at 70% count, which means they don't even need to kill off that last Fleshcrafter if they mind control it and keep it with them.
True.
So that is a nice little extra bonus. They are all done with their count. Extremely done with their count, and they are now just going to get started with Varuth. Meanwhile, Reload Esports at 65% count are going to need to find 3% more, but they can potentially pull onto the boss depending on how they want to do this.
And one of the biggest advantages for the Stiefbruders is that since they've been playing a more conservative route, they have more weapons to work with for things like this. So since they are playing a more conservative route, they are able to Javelin Executioner Varuth and a Marth here. And I suspect that that's what they're going to do once Varuth does end up hitting a low enough health threshold. Where Reload Esports, they're going to be focusing down Varuth almost by itself. They are going to be snapping those slow walking mobs to them. Look at that, they're walking towards them. It's very important where they're positioned. And hey, look, the Stiefbruders right on cue. They end up pulling a Marth. They end up throwing that Javelin. That Windwalker Monk did have that. So they have more weapons to work with for this boss. And since it is a 22 Tyrannical, we saw Reload Esports have some problems with it yesterday. It is absolutely doable, but very scary the way that they are pulling this off here. Look at all these corpses that have snapped, and Executioner Varuth still at like 10% HP. All of the cooldowns are being pressed, but notably not Bloodlust. They hold Bloodlust for, I think it's the last boss. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's the last boss.
Beautiful kiting there by Malik to keep from dying while Varuth remained alive and having the huge healing reduction aura against a 22 Tyrannical boss and a bunch of trash. Not an easy thing to live through. The Reload Esports have done it so far. Now what they need to watch out for is any of those ads being alive during the Grim Harvest cast. If that happens, and we've seen that happen before this weekend, that is where we start seeing wipes very quickly. That basically is a one-shot if even one ad is left unattended. They've done a great job, though, on this first set of preventing that from happening. Meanwhile, the Stiefbruders are just fighting the boss by itself. They also need to watch out for that. They have about 15% health advantage on the boss, and of course, a huge death differential and maybe an extra weapon or two on their backs. So yeah, definitely still the advantage to the Stiefbruders, but if Reload Esports can do the Necropolis and even one less pull, I think they can catch back up potentially.
Oh, the Reload Esports Necropolis pull is absolutely insane, and it's the MDI versus live key pull differential where the Stiefbruders, very safe routing, 0 deaths. This is absolutely phenomenal for them, and it's just like a tale. It's a tale of two coins, right? You have to be very...
A tale of two coins, yes.
Yes, of course, exactly. That's how that saying works. Anyways, stop laughing, Jack. I hear you laughing in the background.
Oh,
no!
There's a free casting mage on the side of the Stiefbruders.
Please don't
They've got to make sure they interrupt that. Oh, beautiful incapacitating roar from Cap Druid. Whew. They're going to be okay. That was scary, though, for a moment there. Wow, that is tough when you don't have enough kicks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off from...
Nope,
I was learning a new story. A new tale. I hadn't heard this one before, but the tale of two coins.
Yes. All right. Anyways, both of the teams killed boss. Take it away, Trentos.
And so we've seen the Stiefbruders now. Cap is going to go on a little adventure here, pick up the orb. For a while there, his team was no Cap as he was going and collecting that orb, but now he's back and rejoined them, and they are flying on upstairs. Reload Esports have also finished off their boss. Looking at the boss 2 splits, you can see Reload Esports accelerated there by almost 2 minutes, almost recovering that boss 1 split. But one thing that's not included on those splits down there is the deaths, right? Those are over at the far right, and you can see that is 1 extra minute in favor of the Stiefbruders as they are getting started, just taking care of these spare parts first. Reload Esports eyeing something much more ambitious.
Dude, the Woodwalker from Stiefbruders almost just got insta-killed by those spare parts. He had them all
Yeah,
fixated
that
onto him.
happens.
It happens to the best of us. But look at this, Reload Esports.
Oh, here they go.
They have that bop on that Shadow Priest as well to be able to mind control this Corpse Collector and get it grouped up. And now you see Ankler lobbing that Javelin into the whole entire pack. Absolutely great job. But here comes the Sanguine. Ooh, right on time with that Silent Sigil on top of those Corpse Collectors. Those Corpse Collectors are bathing in that Sanguine, though. Very unfortunate that they're not able to get them out.
The collectors are actually not in Sanguine. It was a Stitchwork got a couple of ticks, but even that wasn't too bad. Really well done. They're right at the edge of that Sanguine puddle. This is beautiful. The Fleshcrafter is currently in a pool, and I don't think they have any resources left to fix that, so they are going to heal it for a little bit, but now the Collector is going to heal again for a tiny bit, but you know what?
Mind control?
This is really good. This is
Two
really,
mind controls?
really good. Yeah, mind control to run them out. That's
not
great.
bad. Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you mind control mobs, they then start to attack you. They get threat. You have to like taunt them twice before they stop attacking whoever they were mind controlling. And you can see, oh, actually, that's gonna cost a life here. Yeah, that's okay though. You know what? This was all worth. Doing it this way is so fast. And so the Reload Esports are definitely delighted with how this has went. On the other hand, you know, if you look over at the Stiefbruders, things are going well for them too. They are also getting a lot of this area done. I think they still need a little bit of count after, like, of Trasher. Is this the last little bit?
No,
for them?
that's not the last pull. This is not the last pull in this area.
They still have one more or maybe two more to do. Okay, yeah. So definitely Stiefbruders are going to be busy for a while taking out the last little bits of this room, whereas Reload Esports are already underway with the gauntlet here. They are at a full 60 seconds of death differential. But you know what? They could overcome that. I think that this is going to be very close as it stands right now between these two teams.
So whose position would you prefer to be in here? Would you prefer to be in Reload Esports spot, or would you prefer to be in the Stiefbruders position? So the Stiefbruders have a few more weapons, I think, to work with, just as a whole.
I think Reload Esports have maybe 10 or 15 seconds of advantage right now. It's really hard to say, though. There's so many competing factors, as you mentioned, between where the two teams are at.
Yeah, and it's very dangerous, too, because since Reload Esports have committed more weapons, it's going to make their final two bosses a lot more dangerous. But assuming that they can pull it off, they will be able to claw back that 60 seconds of death differential. That's the biggest thing that is separating these two teams, is just that 60 seconds. It's how valuable is that compared to just some of these trash packs. And now Reload Esports has started on Gore Grind, where you see the Stiefbruders here. Now they are starting on those assistants that do that throw cleaver ability. So Reload Esports is like one full gauntlet pack ahead of where the Stiefbruders are.
Yeah, I mean, about 60 seconds, I would say. I mean, yeah, I think that we're looking at basically a tied game right now, which is very cool. I'm pretty sure that whatever's going to happen, Reload Esports is going to kill the last boss first, and then we are going to be seeing if Team Stiefbruders can finish it within those 60 seconds of death differential. But Reload Esports have to be careful. Okay, Gorgrind just gets one tick of Sanguine. That's fine. No big deal. They are now making their way over to the third and final gauntlet pull, and then they will just have two bosses separating them from the end of the dungeon.
Yeah, and notably too, the reason that both of these teams are playing a priest is because they're able to continue to mind control that one Fleshcrafter, and they're keeping it for the remainder of the dungeon. They're going to pull it into Nalthor the Rhymebinder. With the Throw Cleaver ability, it does an insane amount of damage and helps out the group a lot. It looks like the Stiefbruders are losing a little bit of steam on this assistant pull, though.
Yeah, Stiefbruders, you know, it's tough, right? Sometimes you have these pulls where it's like, okay, this is a small pull, so I don't want to use cooldowns on it, so it takes even longer. And that can be something that sort of spirals a little bit for you, but they have managed to get it done. But yeah, as you said, they are now maybe a pull and a half behind where Reload Esports are at. This is something that, you know, Reload Esports, they're about to get into this boss. It's really just going to come down to, I think Reload Esports have this if they can make the two bosses clean, but they have so few weapons to deal with these last two bosses. These bosses are so hard. In many ways, you know, it could just come down to whether or not they can make this work. Here they go.
So the issue that they ran into yesterday whenever they were on this boss is they had like a bunch of creations up that started to cause problems. Then they began to hook one another, and that just spiraled out of control. And making sure that Reload Esports can get Surgeon Stitchflesh killed off in a quick manner, that's the most important thing. So they're going to drop a bunch of offensive CDs here, but notably they don't have Ashen Hollow or Bloodlust, or they're not going to commit Bloodlust, and they don't have Ashen Hollow available. They do have that Flesh Crafter. You saw they were moving that mob in inside of that polymorph, but they also mind controlled it to get that Flesh Crafter stacked on top of Surgeon Stitchflesh to be able to make sure that those cleavers are going to be able to hit the boss. That's very important. And so now they're going to be... Ooh, it looked like their Holy Paladin taunted the creation out to try to get it a little bit of separation from that Flesh Crafter, which may be able to help them out in killing Surgeon Stitchflesh in this next phase. He has to die here, and you need to make sure that their tank is going to live off the side of Reload Esports.
Yeah, this is very, very tough. Stitchflesh now 21% as they start lining up these hooks. Is this going to work out for them? Sometimes when you start having multiple of these creations, yeah, they've done it. Okay, they've hooked the Stitchflesh. Beautiful, beautiful there. And now they have it below 5%, so they are going to be able to finish that boss off. And now it's just about the last boss for Reload Esports. And it's about whether Team Stiefbruders can get this done in less than a minute compared to them. I don't think this is a 1 minute long boss fight. I think it's a little bit more, but we'll have to see as Stiefbruders are now getting started with that boss, and Reload Esports are getting ready to pull the last boss. Reload Esports are going to have a Flesh Crafter teleporting up here to join them. They also need to kill that Flesh Crafter before they can stop the clock. Stiefbruders at 100% count, under no such obligation.
Yeah, they've already killed off their Flesh Crafter, I think, is something that is important. Ooh, and it looks like the Stiefbruders are committing a lot more CDs. I think the Rogue lobbed his Javelin even into Surgeon Stitchflesh, and it's really important. Look at the top of your screen, 60 seconds of death differential. Reload Esports has committed Bloodlust. Now Thor the Rhinebinder is dipping increasingly low. The Stiefbruders need to turn on the gas here for Surgeon Stitchflesh and get to Nalthor as quickly as possible. They are already over 1 minute behind where they need to be. If you see that split, that boss force split for Reload Esports, so that's not looking great for the Stiefbruders. And Reload Esports is just continuing on. You do see that Ashen Hollow has been dropped. They're a little bit slow and they don't get the grip off on Simkins, but it's okay. No zoomer reactions for Reload Esports, but it's not too bad as they are making the best of the bad situation that was the beginning of this dungeon for them.
Yeah, just incredible amount of perseverance and mental fortitude coming out from Reload Esports, being able to not just have that pull go wrong, but have that pull go wrong knowing that this dungeon was like a 30-minute dungeon for you yesterday, right? And you could just see like so many players in that situation would be like, oh, it's happening again, right? So this is just a loss, right? Where let's just give up. You tab over, you see the other teams at 0 deaths, right? And you're just like, yeah, this is over for us. But credit to Reload Esports, they did not do that. They have that champion's mindset here of keeping it going, of figuring out, okay, things went wrong. What do we do from here, right? Let's get back on this. And they have picked themselves up. Now Thor the Rhinebinder, dropping below 15% health. Stiefbruders are going to have a minute of death differential, but there's just no shot they can kill this boss that quick unless they have 70 weapons stored up in their arsenal. Oh no, but Malik goes down for Reload Esports.
This is so good for the Stiefbruders. This is so bad for Reload Esports.
No, how could this happen? Okay, so Reload Esports, they have 3 battle reses. They just need to find either the kill on the boss or the battle reses here. But no, Tettles, they can't. They have to go and do a res. Okay, they have a cheat death thing here for a little while, so they actually can. Oh, they're gonna try and land the cleaver, but it's not gonna hit. 5% on the boss, and it's just Simkins who's left, and he's getting auto-attacked in that cloth armor. There's going to be his cauterize, and the next one is going to be his pod, and I don't think that is going to be enough for Reload Esports, and defeat snatched from the jaws of victory there for Reload Esports, and now instead, the opportunity switches to the Stiefbruders with a run of 0 deaths so far. If they can maintain that, they will win this game against Reload Esports. Despite being so far behind there just 30 seconds ago, they just have to execute this boss fight cleanly, and there will be nothing that Reload Esports will be able to do to get back into this.
This is intentional. This is fine. Yeah. Setso on that when Walker Monkey died immediately, and I was thinking bad things. Like I was worried that it was unintended. Wait, where did he die though? It looks like I don't see his body on the platform.
It takes you a little bit before it'll teleport your body back up to the platform though. Which is good because then you land that battle res, right? And this is, as you said, an intentional strategy. It's faster to just die and get rezzed rather than complete that gauntlet downstairs, even though it gives you 100% crit to do it, assuming you have your battle reses. It's a very small time save, but it can absolutely be worthwhile, unless you're going to have your cooldowns coming up. Usually you want to align those with your crit, but if your cooldowns are down for a while anyways, Just doing that when you have 3 battle reses to spare can absolutely be a time save. Stiefbruders are now approaching that 50% threshold, and they're actually still in a lot of danger here. Their boss, even though they've been doing this run that we've been describing as safe, is nothing like safe at all compared to what people do on the live servers, right? Very few people fight this thing with Sagadon and Oros active, and both teams are doing that, so this is such a challenging boss fight with both of those active.
Reload Esports took a detour and ended up killing Sagadon, which made a lot of sense to me, because they're banking on the Stiefbruders wiping to this boss. That would be the only way that they're going to be able to catch up. And as I say that, Reload Esports, using that Fleshcrafter, they are getting a lot of damage on now. A lot more than I thought that they would at least have.
There's just, if you look at the times, maybe there's a hope that they can do enough damage with the Fleshcrafter to overtake. But if you look at the 85 seconds of death differential, I don't think they have any hope of 85 seconds worth of faster here. But still, their best bet, as you said, is for Stiefbruders to have something go wrong, and that is not impossible. This is a hard boss fight, and we saw on the side of Reload Esports just how quickly 1 or 2 deaths can turn into 5.
Dude, their Disc Priest is and they have 2 DPS down in that phase right now. Ooh, and Impy ends up going down. You see his hands on his head as he's going to come back up with 7 stacks and drop that Frost debuff almost in the middle of the room. It's a little bit off center where he's going to be teleported to. Oh, this could be very bad for the Stiefbruders.
Yeah, where exactly is Impy's body? I can't even see
happened?
It. Yeah, it looks like
he's so frustrated. He may be dead in a non-teleportable location. There are sometimes whenever you die down that platform, if you die in a weird spot, you can't be teleported back up, and it may be one of those situations. And the healer for Stiefbruders has gone down. This is so bad.
Gotta land that battle res.
Cap has to live. They're trying to grab the battle res right now. You do see that engineering battle res coming up. Ooh, and Setso ends up getting threaded on Althor for a second, and ends up getting killed off. I don't know exactly what happened. I do no longer have a battle res. Impy ends up getting rezzed at some point as well. Somehow he's back alive. I don't really.
Oh no!
This is so bad. No.
Cap has gone down here, but Reload Esports aren't out of it just yet. So Team Stiefbruders have now wiped, and Reload Esports are going to try and kill this boss. Looks like they're actually going to try and land a res on Simpkins here. Very ambitious B-res from Malik, even with the boss at 10% health, but now the boss is finally going to die. Reload Esports are going to take out their nemesis there, Nalthor the Rhymebinder. They are going to stop their clock. There are now 90 seconds, minus 30, so 60 seconds of death differential between these two teams, and I don't think there's any way that Stiefbruders can kill this boss in that time. I think this one's going to go to Reload Esports unless, you can see here, Stiefbruders can see it. They are out of this one. Reload Esports are going to take the win here, up 1-0 against Stiefbruders. Wow, that was a rough one.
Yeah, I mean,
still got the timer ticking.
there was a lot of generosity on all sides. You can take the win. You can take the win, but Reload Esports does end up finishing it off. And man, I hate to do it, but that throw by the Disc Priest on the side of Stiefbruders was just very rough. Mind Blast costs a crazy amount of mana, and you do have some pretty decent active regen by just hitting your Solace every 10 seconds for 1% of your max mana, but Mind Blast just ate up all of his mana when he was just trying to break shields and just do extra damage, and I think that just cost him so terribly that he wasn't able to really put out much healing when he needed to, because as you guys mentioned, they skipped Sagadon right there. So their tank is just getting blasted extra damage all the time onto him. So you just hate to see that, and makes this is still been just the kryptonite for the Reload Esports team. They've won twice here, but they certainly made it an experience.
Yeah, so I think, at this point, I'm just really convinced Reload Esports decided to do this for entertainment. So yesterday they said, 19 deaths. Today we're going to do better than that. They had 17 in the end. And I think that's an improvement. I think we all had a great show in that dungeon. Some people more than others, assumably. But including Tratnos' Jinx, I think it went really, really good. So
I think that proves the issue. 22 tyrannical necrotic wake. Okay, whenever you would be, if you gave this dungeon to on like a 19 level to these teams, they would be like, okay, Sanguine's the problem. Sanguine is so hard to practice in this dungeon, it's costing us so much time. Tyrannical is actually what's the problem for like these teams, because that's very reminiscent of a life key. I think everybody's been in this position where you're either wiping to Stitch Flash, you're wiping to a Marth, you're wiping an Althor because you have multiple people sitting down and your healer's like, all right, I'm because I've been DPSing too much. It even happens to Holy Paladins this season where if they're throwing in too much damage, they just run out of mana. It's the exact same problem that like Disc Priest has. It's not unique to Disc Priests. It being a 22 Tyrannical is very rough stuff.
Though the Disc Priest can control it, though. Like, Smite costs near nothing.
Sure.
Mind Blast, for example, was just eating up his mana. He kept throwing it out no matter what. But, there's probably a lot of highlights and lowlights for it. What do you got for us in this one?
There is. What a dungeon this was. I mean, we started with that really, really big pull on the side of Reload Esports. That was such an insane pull. They did not only wipe to it once, but actually twice. So that was incredibly unfortunate. But when the team of Stiefbruders actually killed Blightbone, Reload Esports were back on Blightbone as well, and actually only 2 minutes plus the death timer behind. So like a rough 3 minutes that they had fallen back at this point, which seemed impossible, right? Like everybody was assuming it's over at this point. Reload Esports is not gonna take this win. And then for the team of the Stiefbruders, there happened something unfortunate with Narzuda, who got healed up in the Sanguine puddles, which allowed the team Reload Esports to move on, do this really beautiful big pull here in the middle of the Necropolis and before the second boss. And they saved so much time by that, right? They got all of that time back. They controlled the one mob, the cleaver, which for some reason the Stiefbruders did, and then they killed it anyhow, so that was a bit confusing. And then when we thought they had it in their bag, right, on Nelthor, on the final boss, with such a lead, they wiped here. It just was too much damage. They couldn't keep up with it. The tank died. It was Dratnos that said, they can't throw it away at this point. I give you that one. You caused this. So that was definitely very, very scary for everybody. And we thought, okay, that's it. The Stiefbruders take it. But then the Stiefbruders had that same problem, wiping to the really, really tough tank hits here. And it's not the first time a team has died on the final boss because they didn't kill Sargadon in the MDI. That is so, so sad to see, especially on a 22 Tyrannical. You'd think you might want to play it a little bit safer here, but definitely very entertaining.
Yeah, and that's just been the experience. Sometimes you're the main character of the Necrotic Wake, and sometimes you also still win anyway. So moving on from that lovely dungeon, this is going to set our sights, Stratos, here in PLAGUEFALL, which I don't think gets much easier, really. There's so many pitfalls, man. It's ridiculous. Who made this bracket?
Yeah, it's not just PLAGUEFALL, it's bolstering PLAGUEFALL as well. Now, I did a bolstering PLAGUEFALL key yesterday, and let me tell you, I created some very large giants and stuff in that place. It's very easy to do if you're not careful with how you're pulling. So,
man, you're back to being a DPS main in 4 days, and you're already running up the bolstering board, huh? Dude,
I had to tank this key. You don't understand. I was trading a carry my ult for carry your ult type situation. This was the one where I was playing the tank role. It was quite bad. So hopefully these teams can avoid that. There are a lot of bolstering pitfalls in this dungeon, but of course you do want to try and pull fast, right? It's MDI, so it's also a 19 fortified key level. So the bosses are going to feel so much smoother than the 22 Tyrannical Necrotic Wake ones did. They should be, in fact, it should feel like training weights have been taken off these guys' ankles when they are pulling these bosses. They'll be just so much quicker and less lethal.
That's right. And, once they get some of those pulls together, Titles, we've seen a number of times where some of the giants are patrolling through some very unsavory positions there. They've been a major, major pitfall for some of these teams. Even, I think you mentioned it in previous PLAGUEFALL where the tentacles are coming out. So this this dungeon's going to be one to watch. That's for sure.
Whenever you have to start pulling the tentacles, that it's a very difficult state of affairs for a PLAGUEFALL in the MDI, because a lot of the teams, like, they'll do a pretty big first pull, and with it being bolstering, that's really limited. I think the biggest thing with this PLAGUEFALL and the difference between this and like the Necrotic Wake is how punishing it is. Yeah, if you have a bolstering wipe, it's a problem. At least you're not wiping 2.5 minutes into a boss kind of situation. With it being a 19 fortified, the bosses are like, you could probably reasonably 4-man them and get them killed off fairly quickly with how much DPS these guys have, because both of these teams actually do an insane amount of damage. Like, they are 252 item level, and they have very good players, and their damage is fairly highly optimized, but it's...
You're jinxing it,
man.
You're jinxing it. You're like, oh,
there's
yeah,
no way
totally
they're
4-man.
There's absolutely no way they're going to wipe on Margrave Stradama. Absolutely no chance.
Okay, can we
Tuttles.
note that down? Clip it, ship it. Everybody
There's no way.
take notes. This
Dratnos,
one
do you agree?
is on Tattles.
Well, thankfully, Makes is here to be able to just have the highlight and analysis. Like, well, this is the part where Tettles talked about this pull going fine, and then this boss wasn't going to be a problem. Oh, they formed it.
It'll be
The
fine.
curses. Yeah, all right. Well, we'll see. We'll see if it will be fine on that one. We've been talking about curses this weekend and everything in particular, Makes, about that looming aura over the second-seeded team, and sure enough, it comes to fruition as we've been seeing Omega Pump fighting their way out of the lower bracket. They're still in it, of course, but there's no end of bad juju in the Mythic Dungeon International.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think Reload Esports covered all of their bad luck with that Necrotic Wake key. So yesterday they channeled everything they had into that, and then the keys after that went good. And then today the first 2 keys were really, really smooth. I mean, they still lost, but still they were really great keys to watch, and they played really well. So I think now that they put all of their bad karma into that Necrotic Wake again, we're going to see a really, really clean and beautiful key from Reload Esports. And I think the Stiefbruders are up to something as well. I mean, Tattles already did his parts where he's cursing the better team, from the seeding here. So I think they might stand a chance with Mr. Tattles on their side.
But which of the teams, Dratnos, has your routes? Which of them have the secrets?
I think actually both of these teams, I've seen screenshots of both of them talking about it. Of course, I haven't given away the routes to either of these teams. That would be,
they got them
unfair.
They got them off the internet, though.
There's no way you could do that. No, that would be
They were
impossible.
requesting them, though. They requested a no-skip route.
Yeah.
That's sometimes you just got to do it. There's no shame in it. It's safe, reliable, almost good enough for last game. Was just a route we call holding W, right? Where it's just like you hold W key on your keyboard, right? You walk through the dungeon in a straight line, and that sometimes that's what it takes, right? Sometimes you just gotta play a route without the big chances of failure. I think that was a Necrotic Wake only phenomenon, though. I think 22 Tyrannical Sanguine Necrotic Wake was a uniquely rough set of affixes, but the challenge for these 2 teams is whichever one wins this, if they are looking to earn that ticket out of this group through the lower finals, Necrotic Wake is in that series too. So it's not just like you can forget about it after this point. Like, that is still in one of these teams' future in the universe in which one of them, gets through and qualifies to the global finals. They're going to have to contend with that dungeon again. So definitely something they may have to go back to the drawing board on.
Yeah, that's going to be a future that I'd love to have just a front row seat to be able to see, as, no dungeon is quite like Necrotic Wake in terms of bouncing back from some of those failures and how insanely difficult it can be. It's one of the, we talk about it a number of times about, difficult pulls in PLAGUEFALL or Halls of Atonement or whatnot, where it's all front-loaded at the beginning. But trying to pull off some of these attempts when you're 10, 15, 20 minutes into the dungeon, and then you have a wipe, and then your backup plan is just so difficult to be able to adapt to. It's just unlike anything that we'd ever seen. And now in PLAGUEFALL, especially with that bolstering affix coming into play, this might be a lower level keystone that they might have to contend with here. But still, PLAGUEFALL is no joke. Reload Esports is up 1 right now versus Team Stiefbruders, both fighting for their lives at the bottom of the bracket. Let's get into it here in game number 2.
Okie dokie. So we're gonna see what both of these teams pull off the bat. That's going to be the most pivotal thing from both sides. Ooh, Reload Esports running a Restoration Druid. JB is somewhere smiling gleefully as he's watching Reload Esports on this having this Resto Druid. I wonder if he's playing Kyrian. We will see in just a moment's time. And the Stiefbruders already getting their pull underway. They drop that Ashen Hollow immediately, pop their Bloodlust. Reload Esports also using their Lust. And, ooh, that Resto Druid is playing that Kyrian Covenant, which we know it buffs your group's damage by a significant amount. And Reload Esports are having some bolstering on some of these mushrooms, but they should be able to take care of this in a moment's time. And the Stiefbruders are having some problems.
Yeah, Stiefbruders, Setso goes down there on the monk, and Soul is also going to die here. Now, bolstering is so scary. You can see Cap leaping over there, but just one auto attack from a bolstered mushroom is going to be enough to take him out, and that's going to mean they're going to have to reset and retry this pull. Meanwhile, Reload Esports have gotten, I think, a slightly less ambitious pull, maybe about the same though, have been taken care of, and they were able to do it with the Incinerator as well. One of the most efficient ways to do a bolstering pull is to pull onto a mini boss. One of these tormented mini bosses, that is, because they don't get bolstering stacks.
Sure.
But of course, that dramatically increases the danger of the pull, especially if it's Incinerator and you have that huge damage coming out from that aura. Reload Esports, though, they are wasting no time. They are getting started with Globgrog right now. Remember, even though we saw this team have real big problems in Necrotic Wake twice, this is a team that earlier today was putting up runs that were competitive and in many ways better looking than Echo's runs in both Halls of Atonement and especially Sanguine Depths. We haven't seen that Plaguefall from them yet, but certainly could be, which of those two teams really shows up here in this map could be a huge factor in determining who wins it.
Yeah, and the Restoration Druid off the side of Reload Esports pops Heart of the Wild and is in that cat affinity, doing as much damage as he reasonably can to Globgrog. This double mage composition is also not looking too bad. The Resto Druid is passing this Windwalker Monk in damage. The Windwalker Monk, of course, had to get out and get the para. That's the reason that he's losing to the healer.
Yeah, this is it's also a single target boss where you haven't pressed your Zhuen yet. Zhuen has just come off cooldown now, and they probably are even holding it for the next trash pull. So this is not the spot where you're supposed to do damage, right? You're waiting. You're going to do the AoE damage. It's a 19 fortified. It would be inefficient to bring everybody focused on single target, and so that is going to be the excuse that we'll be using here to explain this one away. Of course, always rough whenever the healer is doing more damage than you, though. It's a situation
it's not a Holy Paladin.
Intimately familiar with, yeah.
It's not a Holy Paladin. It is the unfortunate reality, too. Because you'd be like, oh, Ashen Hollow is just OP. Now you just got beat by a Resto Druid.
Hey, Resto Druids, they pump, especially when you factor in the extra value of the stat buff that they are giving with that Kyrian legendary they're running. Again, for those who haven't seen the Druids this season, one of the big things that they've been using has been the Kyrian Covenant Legendary, which gives you and the person you're bonded with a stat amplifier of 8% of a certain stat, depending on which covenant they are.
They'll be linked.
It can be 8% haste on the mages, yeah.
Yeah, they'll be linked to the mages, so it's going to be 8% haste. Not the best stat for damage to the Resto Druid, probably the third best stat, actually. Ooh, and Reload Esports does have a death on their Windwalker Monk here. This is not looking great, because the Windwalker Monk, he did pop that Zwen and was doing he was one of the primary sources of damage on this pack, but they are able to get him back up. They have that instant cast battle res with that rebirth. Not too bad.
Yeah, the big big
thing here. Dies again.
Yeah, this is rough. You can see a lot of bolstering stacks here, just adding so much to this pack. They are going to be able to recover from this, but this cost them their battle res, and so they are now going to be without that resource as Ankler takes a huge hit from that Fervent Strike style attack that happens if you run near that mob and the tank isn't nearby. So Reload Esports, they are going to be able to recover there. A Quake trolls their res cast, but they will be able to start it once again. Meanwhile, the Stiefbruders have recovered from their earlier difficulties as well. They are now nearly done with Globgrog, so they are about 10% behind in terms of trash, but Reload Esports definitely gave up some time there on that pull. You know what they are going to do, though? They are going to do a huge pull right now onto this barrel. This is so big and so scary with bolstering active.
Yeah, and ooh, okay, so a nice silence signal coming out of Reload Esports. This is very dangerous for this Windwalker Monk, as in that angel form, he is spinning that angel is spinning very fast. So those slimes, they do the corrosive gunk cast in a, what is it, like a 20-yard range around them, probably something like that. And
Wow.
that disease, whenever it gets put onto players, is incredibly scary. But Reload Esports makes very quick work of that trash pack, doing a great job of getting all of that killed off.
That angel form you mentioned, I actually hadn't seen Windwalkers using this before, but this is the polearm from the 9 in the raid.
Really?
Yes. So it's a polearm that lacks any secondary stats by default, but it gives you an active ability to give you 221 of each secondary stat for 30 seconds. But it's on a 3-minute cooldown, which is a little bit awkward for the 2-minute focused Windwalker Monk generally, but it does give you extremely high burst whenever you do activate that. So,
but the general downside,
cool little adaptation, yeah.
The general downside is not running 2 weapons, so you miss out on 1 additional weapon enchant, right? Isn't that the reason that Windwalker monks typically stray away from polearms and more often like to run the 2 one-handers?
2 one-handers, especially at the start of this expansion, was just generally the best for damage, largely from that second enchant. There have been some buffs, though, to 2-handed using as a Windwalker and a couple of other specs that that was true for. And so Windwalker actually now in AoE, it's pretty close. The 2-handed weapon versus 2 one-handers is actually very close in AoE. And single target, you'd still definitely rather be on the 2 one-handers.
People are dropping low for both sides right now. Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
they are.
Okay. The Windwalker monk, right as we're talking about his weapon choice, he ends up getting slain by the tentacle he's picked up. There was nothing he could have done about that. The tank wasn't in melee range. And the Stiefbruders, on their side, they had a full team wipe. So while Reload Esports, if you flip to deaths, they may have a couple of, there may be some teal on their death counter. They've been one-off deaths, right? They've been able to just res and recover. With the Stiefbruders, they have to start all the way at the very beginning of the dungeon due to the lack of checkpoints, and now they're running all the way back, and that's a massive time loss as opposed to the 3 one-off deaths, I would say.
Yeah, you know, as a Windwalker in this dungeon, life is already difficult enough, but when you are the Windwalker and the only melee DPS, it is just, I mean, it's just danger for 20 minutes. Whenever you start the key in this, it's just permanent danger the whole way through. And so, you know, obviously it's tough when you die, but it is very common on the Windwalker if you are playing, like you have to do so much work to avoid those sorts of one-off deaths, especially when there isn't a rogue helping take some of the burden of those melee mechanics off of your back.
I think, yeah, and ultimately the deaths that are occurring are not too super costly here. Ooh, now Reload Esports doubling up on this trash pack. This is a fairly standard pull, but still very dangerous. You have to focus a lot of your damage into this Spine Breaker, as they do have the highest HP in the group. I suspect that was a use of combustion coming out of Simkins, and then Marky on that Windwalker Monk is just spinning to win, doing the most amount of damage to that pack. It says 11.5k, but I have a strong suspicion that they were just stuck in combat. And the timer didn't, or the DPS meter didn't reset. There is no way he did 11.5k to that much trash.
And there we go into Valkyr form once again. Actually going to desync this Valkyr use. Oh no, Stiefbruders! This is so bad for them as well, because these 2 mobs are still alive. They need to kill these off so they can get their res. That is going to be so important. You can see, wow, Impy, look at the concentration on his face as he kites here, doing that Frost Mage specialty of just kiting a mob much more than many other specs are able to do. Frost Mages, with their combination of mobility and slows, are so good for this sort of situation. And on the back of that play, the Stiefbruders are going to be able to turn a massive disaster into only a moderately sized disaster here.
Yeah. So a lot of the times we have Holy Paladins in the MDI, and they're able to DR all the way through this Plague Bomb going off, where Reload Esports not running that Holy Paladin, instead of running that Restoration Druid. I wonder what buttons they are going to have available. Obviously, they have double Ice Block, so it's not going to be too bad, but not having an Aura Mastery or an immunity, ooh, the Resto Druid pops double Barkskin on himself and probably ends up pressing Bear Form as well to be able to live off of that. And Reload Esports, not too bad. Oh, Simpkins ends up proccing his Cauterize.
Yeah, Ice Block was unavailable here.
Yeah.
Just, oh no!
We
have a jump
on
from Dr. Ickes, yeah, taking a player out. Those can be pretty deadly, especially, oh no, now
Ickes is low. Ickes is low, though.
Ickes is low enough that they can get through this. And Marky here, playing that Windwalker, will have the ability to res, although their checkpoint will be updated here as soon as Dr. Ickes does go down. So everybody is able to release, and they are going to be able to continue their way through this dungeon. Now, if I was Reload Esports, I would be pulling Executioner of Ruth here. I'd be saying, you know what? we are not interested in having a last boss where we are in as much danger of wiping as we were last time, right? So let's just kill this tormented mob. We are way
They're
ahead.
not listening.
But you know what? Reload Esports are not interested in that at all. They are going for the faster strategy here, even though they're ahead, and even though things have been a little bit messy for both of the last 2 dungeons for them, they are going to keep their original game plan going of skipping that tormented mob and just going in towards the rest of the dungeon.
I think playing how you practice in this situation is maybe their best bet, because it gives them more experience in like these situations where you do have to recover and continue to play your best route and hope that the other team makes some form of mistakes. And so I think that, in my mind, it makes a lot of sense that they are going to be continuing to just like pull exactly how they have in practice and just try to deal with things the way that they would adapt if they were playing a team that was a little bit more competitive with their times, right?
Right, yeah, and you don't want to spend too much time in the middle of a game thinking about, like, oh, how much should we adapt to how far ahead we are. Like, that's just not as useful as thinking instead about, like, what am I kicking next, right? What am I doing with my cooldowns right now? So definitely a good thought process from Reload Esports, who we've already seen come in with that kind of winner's mindset as they plan to challenge Echo rather than practicing the lower bracket as much as they have.
And so that's the biggest thing too, is like they clearly had practice for Echo, and they've clearly practiced PLAGUEFALL. Of course you're just gonna have some mistakes, right? And some nice Valkyries spinning.
Yeah, so look what they're doing here. They're actually letting this webbing cast go off for a while. That's a really good strat. That means that you stop the spider.
This could be a big archer
cast for a while. Yeah, they are going to get some bolstering sacks out here. But this has actually been something I've liked a lot from Reload Esports. They handled this pull really cleanly. That's a tough pull to combine like that on a bolstering setting. So really well played by them making that happen.
And they do have one mob parrot off to that side, that sniper. They did want a second sniper in. They couldn't really get it grouped up as well as they would like. They'll pull it whenever Dominant Venom Blade starts to get pretty low, then they'll start cleaving that. But it was like, I want to come back to what you were talking about before. That winner's mindset that I think Reload Esports has is something that is truly very important. They want to be continuing to practice and play like they are playing against like some of the top teams in the world. And while mistakes happen, it's the ability to be able to recover from those mistakes that we've seen are it's like a staple from some of the absolute best teams in the world. And for Reload Esports, for them to be able to improve, that is something that they have to do. Of course, they do have all 3 of their DPS were from the Sloth team that participated in the last MDI, so they are continuing to improve, right? They're getting more MDI experience, and they're proving that they can even stand toe-to-toe versus Echo. Sure, that was a 0-2. That's not exactly like you may look at the results and you say, oh yeah, they lost 0-2 to them. It probably wasn't close. No, incredibly close matches, and there was even a chance that they could have won both of those games if there was one mistake made by Echo.
I mean, even just like their match against Sanguine Depths, I don't think it even required a mistake from Echo. I think if you run that match over and over again, they would have won it several of those times, right? Like if you ran that match 10 times, Reload Esports is winning at 5 of them, I think.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that Reload Esports needs to continue to play like that. And I think that they are doing a great job here. They've had a couple of deaths in the PLAGUEFALL. That's unfortunate. They haven't had any like catastrophic mistakes, and they are going to be able to. They pull that sniper into Dominant Venom Blade. They are doing some absolutely top tier MDI style pulls. Their consistency, it still needs to get there, but it is coming. I think is something that is important to point out with this team.
Yeah, they are now done with that little sniper that they had left paralyzed over to the side, and they are now making their way towards the final boss area. They are not out of the woods just yet, though. They, of course, have this little bit of trash to do, and then they have the last boss with 3 Tormented Auras and Quaking all active. It is only a 19 fortified, which means that it will be quick to push the phases, and they can probably push the phases much faster than they get the Infectious Rains. So that should be working in their favor. But, you know, if things go a little bit wrong there, those 3 Tormented Auras they have to deal with are going to be incredibly punishing.
Yeah. And now the Stiefbruders here have down Dr. Ickes. Like that, those wipes that they had at the very beginning of the dungeon are very unfortunate for them. They are, I would say, they are 2 wipes away from Reload Esports at this point. It's an unfortunate situation, but they have played very well across the whole entire weekend, making minimal mistakes. Their routing hasn't always been, I would say their routing hasn't been the fastest, but at the same time, they're getting a lot of experience, which I think is like we were talking about Reload Esports, is the most important thing. You have to build off of your previous MDI experiences to make new ones, I think is something to point out.
Yeah, Stiefbruders here working on Executioner Ruth, but it is going
That's a
to
big
be
devout
on
ad.
Reload Esports. And then, yeah, this thing
That
is
is bad.
large, and it is punching Malik directly in the face. It already
Angler's
punched
in a pod.
Ankler. Yeah, Ankler can't feed if you're seed, of course, is able to prevent that from being a death. Does have to take a 10-second timeout, though, to make that happen. And it looks like Malik actually going to fire off the Fell Devastation to be able to tank a couple of autos there. The way those mobs work is they will bolster each other. They won't bolster the mini-boss, though, so you don't have to worry about waiting for the mini-boss to port away or anything like that. But you do have to make sure you focus all of them down relatively evenly, as Reload Esports are now getting underway with the last boss. They are not popping their Lust on pull. They're saving that for later. It's going to be Combustion on pull, but mostly they are saving the remaining cooldowns, as they now have 3 Tormented Auras while they're dealing with this boss.
Yeah, and that Executioner Baruth one is definitely the most difficult one. I think that Saganon is actually a fairly reasonable debuff to be playing with this boss, even on like live key situations. Oro's Cold Heart Slow, very difficult. But the way that teams have mitigated this during the MDI is typically they're not going to get in combat with these devout ads. Because whenever you're not in combat with them during this intermission, then you won't be able to get effects of that. And you do see that their healer is not going for that. Ooh,
oh no!
The Ankler ends up getting meleeed by one of those devout ads because he was trying to get them killed off. Mages do have a really easy time just kiting those around since they have multiple shimmers and blinks, and so it's not super bad for them all the time. But you see how you can get punished so quickly by having that Oros Cold Heart slow on you.
Yeah, it's such a rough spot to be in, though, as Reload Esports are now firing off their Bloodlust, and they are nearly done pushing Margrave Shadama before she even finishes that first Infectious Rain cast. Going to be very easy,
Nice.
even with the healing reduction, to heal through just the 1 stack.
And this is pretty unfortunate. The Devout ad spawns right on top of the whole entire group for Reload Esports, putting only 3 of their members in combat. Their healer is the one that, more likely than not, needs to stay out of combat because he has the least amount of mobility in the whole entire party. The remainder of his group does have a decent amount, just like blinks and long range mobility buttons. And now Reload Esports has entered the last phase of Margrave Stradama. It is a 19 fortified, so it should not be too bad. Only 1 Infectious Rain is probably going to get cast, and their healer, still just sitting in cat form, does not care about that Infectious Rain. In fact, only one Wild Growth is going to be able to deal with this. The tentacles start spawning for Margrave Stradama, but Reload Esports is able to take this series 2-0.
Well, Reload Esports taking the win on that one, but I really start seeing the wide gaps in this team so far between what they've really dug deep and practiced on and what they have not. They do take that victory 2-0, thankfully.